Any other characters?
Frank Burns.
Okay, good. Frank Burns is based on 3 different officers, all atypical. Okay, is that right? Typical, not atypical. Anti-communist to the death, you know, and totally misunderstanding where we were and what our mission was and so forth. And so he was a flag-waving patriot, anti-communist. And frankly, after the years that I've been teaching, I always say, and I know it upsets people, that's what led to all of our problems, is this anti-communism thing. We went into Korean War. I was in that also. We went in there because we wanted to stop the domino effect, so we'd become communist. We should never have gone to Vietnam. Shouldn't have gone to Iraq either. These wars were not necessary. Ho Chi Minh during World War II, I see I'm getting off track, was an ally of the United States. And I talked to the man that was his OSS Army advisor. We sent aid to him. We sent aid to Mao Zedong. 10% of all the foreign aid. But guess who did the most fighting?
Americans.
No, communists. Ho Chi Minh and his people did a very effective job fighting the Japanese on our behalf. He loved this country. I got in trouble. Tell this either. I got in trouble when I was on base. They made me, briefly, I was the first veteran of the Vietnam War to come back and go on the faculty. And so right away I had to be the off-post presentation officer. I hated that job because I had a movie and a canned speech, and I don't like to give canned speeches. I just don't. But anyway, it was over here in the VFW, and they had to close the bar to get a decent audience. You know, and I understand that. I wouldn't want to go hear some professor talk about, or military officer talk about something. And so they brought all these people in, and right in the front row was an older couple, and the father was out of his gourd drunk. And he had this poor kid sitting beside him who was about to be drafted. And that's the worst position you can be in, you know. I mean, I understand they worry about this kid. So anyway, he stood in front. We had to ask a requisite question. Can you help us in our war in Vietnam? Can you recommend anything that we should do that we're not doing? And he stood up and staggeringly and drunkenly said, yeah, I got the idea to save the whole situation. And I said, yes, sir, what is it? He said, you've got to get 2 kinds of fatigues. You've got to get one side green, and you got the other side brown. And I said, okay, to what purpose? Well, he said, then they can lay down in them rice paddies on the green side, nobody will see them, and they can turn over when they get into the mountains, and they won't see them there either. Well, we didn't use snipers that much in Vietnam. You know, that wasn't our problem. There were just too many Viet Cong, you know. But anyway, that was always a problem for me. And at the college, of course, I was pretty well accepted and honored as a veteran that knew what he was talking about. You know, I haven't lived it. I'm a Korean veteran and a Vietnam veteran. There are not a lot of us around, frankly. Anyway, other characters. Let's see. Do anybody else think of one? I'll have to dredge my...
Radar.
Well, okay. That's good enough. Thank you. I should.
I liked him.
I was going to wait for somebody to say that before I... Number 1, let me tell you about the real Radar O'Reilly, okay? And it's in this first line in this book, because this man was my boss in Pyongyang, North Korea, and we experienced much of this. He puts a humorous side to it, which was his skill, and I have one confession to make to you. Mom, when did we find it, out in Iowa or here?
What?
His script.
Oh, when you got here.
Yeah. Took it out there in our luggage, or in our packing, and brought it back here and never found it till we got back here just a few months ago. He would type up scripts, for shows in the Officers Club. And the Officers Club, by the way, was what is shown in the movie, which is Strength. officers' clubs really for officers only. We didn't have enough officers, and we had too many enlisted men, so we just had a club. They had to call it an officer club, but that's the way it's set up. But anyway, he wrote a script called Crud. You know how M.A.S.H, or is it on this cover? I thought it was. It's usually on, like it is on my hat, with asterisks between the letters. And he wrote one called with Crud, K-R-U-D, with the same kind of asterisk. And that stood for Korean Returnee Utilization Detachments. And for anybody that was there, it was the funniest thing you'd ever hear. Honest. It was about how you had to get out of Korea on points. You could only go home on points. And you had to get points for certain things. And one of them was you had to survive the snowfall in Korea July 4th. Well, no, you know, it's funny. It really is funny. And I tried to give it back to his widow, but you know, they're always afraid, and that's why in this book you have to read it carefully. You have to read the foreword. Let me just read that to you, because see, it's a novel, quote unquote. That's so he doesn't have to pay all the people he uses in the novel. That's what it's all about. You have to get a release from everybody that you talk about in here, and he changed the names and kept us out of getting any money, and that's okay. I don't want any money from it. But anyway, he says here in the foreword, the characters in this book are composites of people I knew, met casually, worked with. He was my boss in Pyongyang, North Korea, and so forth. And the first line I'll just read real quick. When Radar O'Reilly, just out of high school, left Ottumwa, Iowa, and enlisted in the United States Army, it was with the express purpose of making a career of the Signal Corps, hence the radar part. That's not true. I thought I was joining the Air Force because the Air Force had just been created and they had no recruiters. And I went to an Army recruiter trying to get in the Army, and he was supposed to help me get in the Air Force, and I didn't, hey, don't give me any credit for intelligence, please. Not that kind, anyway. I didn't realize I wasn't in the Air Force until I got to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and there's all Army people around here, and I'm being trained as a soldier. I didn't know that. You know, it's dumb and so forth. But anyway. Now, radar. I was indeed born in Ottumwa, Iowa. I was born in the worst year you could be born in that period, 1929. And I had a devoted, hard-working mother and a lousy father. He was an alcoholic and a womanizer, and I don't know how she put up with him. But anyway, she died when I was 3 years old, and he abandoned me and my brother and my grandfather, who had been living with us. And so eventually we ended up in a coal bin, living in a coal bin on East Main Street in Ottumwa, Iowa, starving to death. And then came for FDR. And then we had the WPA. And I got to do a political side, I apologize. But I met President Obama for about 15 minutes in Axelrod for 15 minutes talking about Veterans Affairs in Ottumwa, Iowa, because the president asked to meet radar. That's what I love. Yeah, I use it for everything I can do to help fellow veterans. I really do, and to help students. But anyway, we barely survived. I developed tubercular symptoms, and they sent me to tubercular sanitarium in the summer for 2 summers. And while I was in that tubercular sanitarium, my grandfather died. And so when it came time in the fall, there was nobody to pick me up. Nobody picked me up. There was nobody. And they put me in a foster home. And luckily, that first foster home was perfect. People who were genuinely trying to help kids, not get farm hands. That's what most of them did. They wanted some kid to work as a farmer or a maid in their house. And I got in trouble. I don't want to bore you with all that. But anyway, I got treated, and skinny and unhealthy as I was, the Army would take me because then they'd take anybody. the end of World War II, see. They didn't take anybody. And later, I have to tell you a story. We were stationed, well, first of all, I took my basic training at Fort Knox, as I told you. Then they sent me to Camp Lee, Virginia, then, for quartermaster training. And I couldn't figure out why that was, but all they wanted was to teach me to type faster. I had taken typing in high school, and they wanted me to, and so they made me clerk, see? And my first assignment was to the 2nd Mobile Army Surgical Hospital at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Now, I never saw a doctor all the time I was in that unit. Because in peacetime, the doctors are not there. They're over at the base hospital function. And they only come into our units in time of war. So we never got any doctors in the 2nd Mobile Army Surgical. I never saw a doctor the whole time. But just before we went to Korea, we were the first unit to be ordered out of Fort Bragg, by the way, which I give my airborne friends a lot of trouble because they're first to fight, freedom fight. They never did leave Fort Oliver or Fort Bragg. But we did, that medical unit. We were the first one out on a troop train, run the same way they did it in World War II, and that was the experience I treasured. A troop train with troop sleeping cars and troop kitchen cars and all. Because see, we don't have any of that. It used to be over here near Fort Oliver, remember? Yeah. President's train used to be over there. Why did we give it away, first of all? You know, it's down in Florida now, some multimillionaire was given to it by General Eisenhower, or President Eisenhower, and he didn't even own it. It was owned by the Association of American Railroads. But that's where you got to go see it. They used to sit right over here. You could go and see it anytime you wanted to. We didn't guard it. Secret Service would guard it before they started to use it, but they never used it again. And it sat over there. So somebody in Dundalk has the president's medicine cabinet. See, it was the Army Transportation Corps for years. That's why it was established. And they rehabilitated just before General Eisenhower, or President Eisenhower gave it away. And they took out everything and put new stuff in. And I happened to have met the man that took the medicine cabinet, shaving mirror, is what he was thinking about. And so it's here in Dundalk someplace. As is the symbol, the transportation symbol up on top of that big hangar building. I'd love to have either one, but that's true. Anyway, then we left Fort Oliver, or Fort Bragg, excuse me, and went by troop train all the way across the country. And I was the acting chaplain because, chaplains work the same way as doctors. And I had been assigned a chaplain, but they didn't let there were no doctors on the ship train and no nurses because they were separately. I think they flew them, if I remember right. But anyway, I had to conduct a religious service in the middle of the Great Salt Lake, and I've always thought, you know, so kind of that, because we had a business car on the back, which was the headquarters car, and I held a Sunday service in the middle of Salt Lake. And but anyway, we got to Camp Stoneman, California, and then we took a ferry, actually the old Delta Queen, down to Fort Mason, got on a troop transport, A.E. Anderson, and away we went to the war. But we had to stop in Japan to get ready for the Incheon invasion. And unfortunately, our operating room equipment was stolen off the docks in Yokohama. So suddenly, change of plans. They sent us to a little tiny base down in southern Japan, Kyushu, Camp Saitozaki. I'll never forget that. And this was an army post that had been abandoned by the active military, but all the dependents were left behind. The husbands were all rushed to Vietnam, or to Korea, I'm sorry. I mixed my wars, I apologize. But we came on base, and just recently I found 8mm film of that period, which I didn't even know I had. I put it on DVD, and I found it. And we went down there to prepare, and I was the post chaplain as a sergeant. Now, I know that sounds dumb, but you do what you're told to do. And I met some wonderful military families, and certainly some nice Japanese ladies that actually had been running a chapel anyway. But then we got on board, and are they Navy veterans? World War II? I know there's not many left, but anyway, I know
One
you
right
are.
here.
We got on board a little Japanese ship with the only flag they were allowed to fly at that time, which is red triangle and green triangle. We wouldn't let them fly the Japanese flag, obviously. And I made jokes about this whenever I lecture, because we had an arrangement with the Japanese during World War II. You didn't know that, did you? We said, you can have the ships at the bottom of the sea and we'll take the top. But that posed a problem when we occupied Japan because they had no ships. So what did we do? We gave them some of our Navy ships that we didn't need anymore. And one of them was the Herkimer, USNS Herkimer. Okay, that was its name. And it had been renamed, obviously, when the Japanese got it, to the Herkimer Maru. They always put Maru on the end of it, and I always love to tell people that's because Maru means circle, and it's a very superstitious thing. Japanese don't like me to tell you that. But as you know, I graduated from Japanese University in that second period when I was undercover in Japan for 10 years, a target against China. And that's where I got in the background to teach it here at Oliver, and frankly helpful up there too. Remember, we went to Hong Kong, and I could take you up and look over into China. Well, later I took a whole group to China.
Right.
And boy, was that a wonderful experience. Because they opened up everything to me, including the underground bomb shelter program. And it's just unbelievable. I asked for things that they didn't even understand. I said, I want to see Madam Chiang Kai-shek's love nest. I said, what? I said, I know where it's at. Just take me there, and I would like to see it. They said, okay. And we went, and it was being used as a Communist Party cadre training school now. And they wouldn't let me go up to her bedroom. So I snuck off and went anyway. And you can imagine how these old Chinese gentlemen in their underwear, taking their siesta, were surprised to see an American knock on the door and open the door and come in. I never forget that face, those faces, you know. They must have thought there'd been an invasion or something. But there indeed was the mirror on a ceiling, and Chiang Kai-shek was never allowed to come there because she had a boyfriend. I don't know what you call a mistress male. I don't, I really don't.
Male mistress.
But she had one.
How about a lover?
Lover, thank you. And Chiang Kai-shek was never allowed to go there because her marriage to him was a political thing. There's no love involved. He didn't marry her. He had to divorce his Chinese wife and children, ban on him. But he did that to get in with the United States, see, because she was a prominent Methodist family. Really. All the Sung sisters, the three Sung sisters, were Wesleyan College graduates. Various and Madam Chiang Kai-shek, and there's a whole different story if I ever get a chance to lecture history again, I'll let you ask questions. I think you'd be fascinated. But I had that TV program on Cable 6 here. And if any of you take that, please see me afterwards. Because we're still looking for one that Ben Woomer arranged. And we took the camera crew up to New Jersey and interviewed a wonderful lady who was prominent in the Titanic story. She was one of the survivors of the Titanic. And he found her someplace. And we had to take all the crew up there in the station wagon, crowded together, but it was worth it because she had all of her mementos. Mm-hmm. And she is the lady that the little knife was used to cut the rope to get the lifeboat down. I can't marry something. I can't remember it. And the owners of the Titanic exhibit, where my granddaughter works, are desperate to get that film. And the only way you can find it is if somebody in Dundalk probably taped it. And I know a lot of people didn't tape them, so probably never find it. Let's see. Then we finally got our equipment back, and we got on board this old ship. And I hope I'm not, yeah, I'm getting close. I always tell the story in order to illustrate something in the book. I'm sure it's in the book. Anyway, when we got down to the dock, the author of this book, I went down there. He was an M.A.S.H, not a doctor, by the way. That time he was drafted out of medical school, but he was a medical service officer, Medical Service Corps, M.A.S.H. And we went down there, and here they are trying to load this old World War II Navy ship with their own equipment on the ship, and loading trucks and heavy equipment. And we became concerned they'd drop it. The crane would collapse because it was old and rusty. And we're standing there looking at this, and he was a major colonel, lieutenant colonel, I think, and he looked at me and he said, "Look at those good guys. Look at our fine troops. Down. Look at the look on their faces as they watch that truck go up." Oh, he said, they're so dedicated. They had smuggled 2 Japanese prostitutes on that truck, and 2 dogs. And they were afraid they'd kill their girlfriend or whatever they call them. And when we got on board the ship, the captain saw my cross on my helmet, and he was a Christian. And you didn't meet a lot of Christians, but you didn't have to look hard. There's a lot of Christians in Japan. Always have been. One of the tragedies of Nagasaki is we destroyed with that bomb 10% of all the Christians in Japan. Catholic Church had come there in 1522 and established a strong Catholic presence. Still there. And we wiped out 10% of it with that bomb. But anyway, we got loaded on the ship. He called me up to his cabin. He said, I'm thinking about becoming a full Christian. Get baptized, he said. And I said, okay, what can I help you with? And he started sharing his life and reasons for asking to be. But he said one of the visits, he had me up every afternoon. Now we had no sleeping accommodations on that ship. We had a tent city, literally on the decks. We had cardboard little shanties, and on the rear of the ship we had our bathroom facilities. 14-holder, if I remember right. But you could always watch how the diet was going by watching the toilet paper float back over the ship. It was what I called a seagoing bidet. I don't think I actually reached it, but And one day he asked me, he said, I got a problem. He said, do you believe in ghosts? And I said, no, not really. Are you talking about the Holy Ghost? And I thought I could, no, I mean real ghosts, like ghosts. And I said, no, I don't really believe in ghosts, but why do you ask? He said, well, I was off taking my evening constitutional before I went to bed last night, and I saw these 2 white figures on my deck of my ship, and I tried to chase them, but they disappeared. You know who it was? The 2 prostitutes with sheets around them to get air. And by the way, later in Korea, I had to phony the first, I was good at phoning things, I'm sorry. That's why I got into intelligence, I guess. But I forged the first UN travel documents ever made. Document 1 and 2, to get those 2 girls back into Japan. And you ought to see how I do when I forge things, because it was impressive. That seal and gold and so forth. And they got in. That's what we were going to do. We had to get back to bed. They're both pregnant. And what are we going to do with 2 pregnant girls in Korea? Because we were headed for Pyongyang, following the first category. So we got up there, and that's where most of the story in the book takes place, really. And the second tour, when we came back after we got kicked out, we were stationed in Daejeon. And that's the first time I fully realized that we had occupied South Korea at the end of World War II. And we talked about that. The reason the 30th parallel was chosen was because 2 lieutenants, it's always the little guys that do these things, I got to tell you that. Generals take credit, but some slugger does it down on the ground. And one was a naval lieutenant, one was an army lieutenant. They're both named Remington. Ring a bell? Typewriter family? Very devout Puritans, I guess you could, well, you know, modern, I don't look at it. I don't even Presbyterian, but anyway, they had to send one son to missionary activities in that family from the beginning, when they first got rich. And one of the families went to North Korea, to Korea then, not North, and set up a missionary activity. And I was so proud to visit the First Presbyterian Church in Pyongyang, North Korea, which had been converted into a dance hall. And she had been blown apart, blown in two by a shotgun blast in the house where she lived, because she wouldn't leave. When the war ended, they were there interned by the Japanese. But when the war ended, they went back, and she wouldn't leave. And the communists took over, of course, and they wanted all Americans out of there, and they couldn't drive her out, so they just murdered her. And here's what's another. As the chaplain, acting chaplain, I had to escort, what is it called, watch over the nurses when they wanted to go out alone, you know, with no armed escort and so forth. I was their chaperone, that's the word I'm trying to think of. And the nurses wanted to go, including Hot Lips, wanted to go visit the 5th Air Force headquarters. Now, Hot Lips, I know what her motive was. They were paid better than the troops were. She could ask a higher price. Her going price was, among the Army people, was paratroopers, because they got $100 a month extra. And she would probably take that away from them, or they would give it to her, I think it's a better word. But anyway, so I went there, and that had been the house where this lady was killed, and had been, just prior to the war, Kim Il-sung's home. And they took me down in the pilots took me down in the bunker of Kim Il-sung, the founding father of North Korea. And I prize all this because you don't get those kind of chances. But I also was able to study history in that city, and that is fascinating, really fascinating, because the first American contact took place in North Korea, not South. Back in the early days, when the black ships came to Japan, they also sent one flotilla up the Taejon River, doesn't sound right, Taegu River, to Pyongyang to open the country. And they ran aground on a sandbar, and they destroyed the ship and killed all the crew. But they kept the anchor chain.